being totally honest, most of us don't like waiting. Particularly if we're waiting for something to change or something to get better. Waiting can be a very frustrating experience. Have you ever been at a red light that won't change? It means you're stuck there. And things aren't letting you go forward. But the worst kind of waiting of all is waiting on God. When God forces you to wait for things to get better in your life, for things to improve, to change, to reverse, and nothing is happening. He's got me waiting too long for my destiny, for my purpose, for my provision, to reverse my circumstances. Many of us are like Habakkuk, chapter 1, verse 2, when he cries out, "How long, O Lord, how long? Do I have to call on you and you do not answer?" He says in chapter 2, verse 3, he hears the words, "You got to wait." It's bad enough to have to wait, but then to have to wait and you not tell me how long? You're leaving me stuck. You're not answering me and you're not giving me any information. The unfulfilled dreams. And you're just waiting. And sometimes it gets so bad it feels like God is scraping a rake over your soul. And yet, over and over and over and over and over again in the Bible, we're told to wait on the Lord. Let me give you the definition of waiting on the Lord. Waiting on the Lord biblically means to not go outside of God to resolve your issue. Let me give you a definition. To wait on the Lord means to not go outside of God to fix the issue you're waiting for. There is the temptation when you are waiting on God to intervene in your circumstance, and he is taking his time, not talking to you, to take care of it yourself, outside of his revealed will. Where you abandon his word, you abandon his will, because you are tired of waiting. And since God, you're not going to fix it, I'll fix it. And so you stop waiting on the Lord and you take matters into your own hands. James chapter 5 talks about this a little bit when James says in verse 7, "Therefore be patient, brethren, until the coming," that is the divine intervention of the Lord. He says, wait on the Lord. Don't go outside of God. Okay, watch this. Because if you go outside of God to make it happen apart from God, you delay God in his intervention. One of the ways he says in James 5, you know you're delaying God is you're spending a lot of your time complaining instead of worshiping. If you have a complaining spirit, that's not just being honest about a problem. That means that you have become a whiner against God and against others because you're tired of waiting. He says instead of God being your deliverer, he now must be your judge. You do not go outside of God to make happen what you're waiting for God to happen because you delay it happening. In the Bible, there are many illustrations of people having to wait. on God to fulfill his word in their lives. Abraham and Sarah had to wait 25 years before the promise of God for a child according to his will. It got delayed because they went in the flesh. They had to wait. Negatively, waiting on God means not going outside of God to resolve the issue. What it does mean is obeying God as you wait, based on his revealed will from the word, because you will never see what he plans to do in secret unless he sees you're obeying what he's revealed. God doesn't tell you everything he's going to do, but what he has told you, he expects you to do until he shows you what you don't know that he will do. You see, when God is silent, he's not still. But a lot of his activity and a lot of his purposes are being woven underneath the dirt until such time, within the confines of his purposes and will, he is ready to reveal it. 2 Peter 2:9 makes it clear God knows how to deliver his people. It's not a lack of ability. So when you are tempted to complain about the waiting, that is an invitation to worship. When the tempting to complain, that's not just being honest, that's a whining attitude about it. Honesty, God encourages, even being honest with him. But that is a call to worship while you wait and as you obey. Two things are happening. If you are a serious Christian, two things are happening while you're waiting. No matter what you're waiting for, assuming it's legitimate and you're following his will, perhaps not perfectly, but consistently and honestly, two things are happening. And nothing and no one illustrates these two things like the story of Joseph. I want to take you to a passage in Psalm chapter 105, where the psalmist rehearses God's plan and work through Israel, and he comes to the Joseph story of the plan that took place in Genesis. But the psalmist is rehearsing it for us in Psalm 105. I don't want you to miss this. It'll answer many of your questions. Psalm 105, verse 16 says, "And he, God, called for a famine upon the land. He broke the whole staff of bread. He sent a man before them, Joseph, who was sold as a slave. They afflicted his feet with fetters. He himself was laid in iron," watch this, "until the time that his word came to pass. The word of the Lord tested him." 3 words, until the time. Until the time. There was a timing aspect to Joseph's life. Now, watch this. We are told he sent a man, Joseph. Don't miss that. He sent Joseph. But wait a minute. How did he send him? One reason that God has waiting, you waiting, me waiting, us waiting for various things is he's doing something bigger than you. I know you are going through it, but what he's doing is bigger than you. And because he's plaiting things together, like a rope or a braid of hair being plaited together, he's taking a strand here and a strand there and a strand there. He's hooking something up, and you're just one strand. So he's doing something bigger. Why did he send Joseph? He said he sent Joseph before them. In other words, he sent Joseph ahead of his other brothers and Jacob, his father. He sent Joseph ahead to prepare the way for the rest of the family to come in order to build the nation in the land of Egypt. So while Joseph was the one being sent, he was being sent for a bigger purpose. That's why when Joseph finally realized what God was doing, he says, God sent me here to save y'all. One of the reasons you are waiting is because God is up to something bigger than just you. But how did he send him? Well, guess what? His brothers got jealous. His brothers got jealous of the coat of many colors his father made for him. That got him thrown into a pit. He was thrown into a pit, argued that he was dead. His brothers sold him to the Ishmaelites as a slave. He wound up being taken in slavery and sold in Egypt to Potiphar's house. Once in Potiphar's house, it looked like things were getting better until one day he's accused of rape. Even though he didn't commit rape, he is thrown in jail. Guess how God sent him? He sent him through things that went wrong in his life. He sent him through things that were going backwards in his life. He sent him through one negative situation after another negative situation, and he's miserable while God is sending. He's miserable, not knowing whether he's going to live or die, and God is saying, oh, yeah, I got to get you out of here, and I'm going to create negative situations to get you out of here. And you know what really gets bad while you're waiting? Watch this now. When God gives you a little hope and the hope dies. It's bad enough to wait. But don't give me hope while I'm waiting and then kill the hope. Remember, his two cellmates had dreams. He interpreted their dreams. He told the one that lived, he says, remember me to Pharaoh. And the guy forgot him. He finally looked like, I'm going to get out of here. And he was stuck in there 2 more years. And now I'm stuck for 2 more years after I was doing what you wanted me to do in jail. If you've walked with God for any time, you know he doesn't mind U-turns and detours. Looks like he's finally directing you where you want to go, and then he spins a U on you. You're going backwards when you thought you were going forward. It's rarely a serious Christian that does not run into divine detours to their destiny, their deliverance, or their purpose. God is doing something bigger than you. There's a second reason that he has us waiting. He says it in verse 19, until the time that the word came to pass, that God fulfilled what he was going to promise to do, the word of the Lord tested him. It tested him. What is a test? A test is an adverse circumstance that God allows to come into your life for your spiritual development. Let me say that again. A test is a negative set of events or circumstances that God allows to come into your life to develop you. Because God is not merely after the thing you want him to do. He's after changing the person that he's dealing with. God is after developing our spiritual depth and our spiritual character. It says, and he tested him until that word came true. Because God is after something deeper than what you're praying for. God is after the development of the person and not just the delivery of the blessing. It's easy to worship him when nothing is wrong. It's easy to worship him when the tree is full. It's easy to worship him when the account is thick. It's easy to worship him when the health is tight. It's easy to worship him when the pain is gone. But do you worship me because I am who I am and not only for what I can do for you? The second most important spiritual truth in your life. The first one is the gospel, where you hear the good news of Christ and you accept the Lord Jesus Christ as your personal Savior. That's the most important thing you can do. But then this second truth is the key to living your life. Theologically, it's called the sovereignty of God. It means God is in control of all the circumstances, good and bad. That's why you can give thanks to God with the negative, because the negative only got to you when it passed through his fingers by permission. And we're not talking about when you're rebelling and sinning against God. Then you brought on the negative. We're talking about when you're trying to follow God, you're trying to obey God, you're trying to serve God, and bad things are happening, negative things are happening. Do not lose sight of the sovereignty of God. And neither did Joseph. So I'm going to answer your question now. How do you know when you're waiting on God that God is still with you? His understanding is inscrutable. You cannot figure God out, only by what he reveals, but you cannot figure God out. So trying to guess and asking 1 million people who are as lost and waiting like you are, I'm trying to figure it out. He says, my ways are inscrutable. But he says, I'm not sleeping. I don't get weary. Neither do I get tired. Well, God, how do I make it in the meantime? He answers. He gives strength to the weary. And to those who lack might, he increases power. Though youths grow weary and tired, and vigorous young men stumble badly, yet they who wait for the Lord. So now we're back to waiting. Watch this now. Here's how you know God is with you while you wait. He gives you new strength. Yeah, that's what he says. He gives new strength. God says the way you know that I am with you is I recharge you when you're running out of juice. Watch this. And he says, I recharge you in one of 3 ways. The first way, those who wait upon the Lord, verse 31, will gain new strength, a strength you didn't have before. 1, they will mount up with wings like eagles. An eagle who gives birth to eaglets puts sharp objects in the nest. Thorns and broken tree limbs and things that are sticking. Then she covers the nest with leaves and soft things over top the thorny things. So that as the eaglets in the nest grow, she wants to kick them out of the nest. Like your teenagers, you want to get rid of them. So when they get bigger, she takes the soft things away, the leaves and the soft things, leaving behind the sharp things to create an irritation. So now the eaglets are irritated and want to get out the nest because the eagle says it's time for you to fly on your own. So things have become so uncomfortable in the nest that she pushes them out because they're too irritated in the nest. But the problem is they have never flown before. So they're out there trying to make it. But when the eagle sees that the eaglet cannot make it, she swoops down with eagle wings. And her talons reach down and catches the falling eagle on her wings and delivers it back to the nest until it's time to try it again. When God sees that you're falling and you're not going to make it, he swoops down out of nowhere and catches you by his grace and lifts you out of that situation. It's called divine intervention. When God comes out of nowhere, brings something into your life that catches you when you thought you were going to lose your mind, that catches you when you were ready to quit. What he's letting you know is, I'm not ready to change it, but I do want you to know I'm here. And so he swoops down. That's one way. Way number two, he says, and they will run and not get tired. This is when God gives you a second wind. This is when you're running, and you know you get to that place when you're running when you don't think you can make it. But if you keep going, you pick up this second wind. This ability to go further than you were thought to go. So what he does is he kind of runs alongside you. He sees you, he sees you huffing and puffing, and he'll pat you on the backside. Come on, come on, come on. You're going to make it. And all of a sudden, you want to know where this second wind came from and how can I keep going? That's called new strength. He doesn't swoop down and lifts you out of it. What he does is come alongside and keeps you going in it. There's a third way. He closes with the third way. He says, and you shall walk and not become weary. Oh. This is when God doesn't swoop down and deliver you out of it. Eagle's wings. He doesn't give you a second wind. You got to walk. You know when you have to walk? When you're hurting too bad to run. God provides some encouragement along the way. Something just to talk to you. And you know the beauty of an encouragement? The beauty of encouragement, it makes you forget you're walking. Because you're talking and you're fellowshipping and you're going along. That's why God created the church, so that you don't have to walk alone. So that you don't have to be by yourself. Church isn't just for sermons and for songs. It's so that you don't have to walk alone. You don't have to stand alone. You don't have to be by yourself. You know, they've got these moving sidewalks. So when folks have a lot of luggage, they get on the moving sidewalks. The moving sidewalks is underneath them. So you can walk, but while you walk, you're being carried. Because you can't leave the heavy stuff behind. You need something to lighten the load. And some of you here today, you're carrying too much luggage. You're carrying too much weight. It's too heavy to walk on your own. So God provides a moving sidewalk, something to undergird you as you walk until the load gets lifted. But whether it's swooping down, running, or encouragement by walking, in either way, you get new strength. As you wait on the Lord, he recharges your battery. Some of you here today, you may be in the checkout line. You may be wanting to throw in the towel on God. You may be wanting to give up because you waited too long. Just do me a favor. Before you check out, check up. Because God may turn things around when he sees you are fully committed to him. As we get into God's word and learn about his great name. In fact, the power of God's names. Names matter. They matter in our lives. They matter in our world. They matter because they give us clues about people, places, and things. If I say Bill Gates, you're going to think money. Names matter when a woman takes on the name of her husband. Because when she takes on his name, that represents a relationship. And many of our hopes and dreams are tied to that relationship. In fact, we're very concerned that names don't misrepresent us, but represent us. Nicknames fit in that category. If I call you Slim, that pretty much means you're skinny. If your nickname is Chubby, that pretty much means you're a round ball. Because names can be very descriptive. Because names matter. Folks take autographs of celebrities. They want their names written down so that they can say, I met him or her. I know him or her. Because names matter. Well, if names matter among people who go and come, whose names may or may not truly represent who they are, then the concept of names mattering when it comes to who God is ought to be that much more valuable and that much more important. And that's why we're studying the power of God's names. Because we want to look at the key names of God, what they mean, and why they matter. Why they matter for your life and your spiritual well-being, and what that name or those names can do in your everyday existence as a believer in God and a follower of Jesus Christ. The Bible has a lot to say about the name of God and how critical it is. For example, Psalm chapter 8, verse 1 says, O Lord, how majestic is your name. Psalm 29, verse 2, ascribe to God the glory due his name. Psalm 86, verse 11, fear God's name. Psalm 111, verse 9, awesome is his name. Proverbs 18, verse 10, the name of the Lord is a strong tower. Over and over and over and over again, we hear about the glory of God's name. But God has a whole plethora of names that describe him throughout the Bible. Because God's names are designed to give us clues into his nature. They are just not nomenclature for you to pronounce a word. It is to give you clues about who he is. God's name is so special, so unique, his name is to be hallowed. In fact, we were taught to pray that way. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. The word hallow means set apart, unique, or sacred. It's like the word holy. In fact, they're born out of the same root family. To be sacred. It means that you're holding it in a unique position. You know, in our homes, we have dishes in the sink. We'll call them the profane dishes because they're dirty. Then you've got dishes in the kitchen cupboard. We'll call those common dishes because they're regularly used for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But then you have sacred dishes. Those are in the dining room. They got their own room, their own glass encasing, and nobody better not touch them because they're for special occasion and guests because they've been deemed to be holy, set apart, or sacred. They've been hallowed and are to be handled in a unique way. Hallowed be thy name. God's name wants to be held in the unique position that it ought to occupy in our lives and in our world. You know, in Genesis chapter 11, the first 9 verses describes the erection of the Tower of Babel. Here men wanted to build their own civilization and their own religious order independently of God. And in chapter 11, verse 4, God says that mankind has come together in disobedience to his command, and he says the reason they came together is to build a name for themselves. See, they wanted the name, they just didn't want his name. And they were even going to build a religious order, we call it a ziggurat, right in the middle of civilization that would reach up to the heavens. Man making his way to God, but doing it using their own name. It's like a wife who says, I don't want to wear your name anymore. I don't want the association. I want my own name or my own name back. Well, that's what mankind does when they have religion but want to exclude God. When they say in God we trust, but don't trust that God. When they say God bless America, But America doesn't want to bless God. We want the nomenclature without the person. And we want our own name. Now, we all know what forgery is. Forgery is the unauthorized use of your name. It's somebody taking your name who's not been given permission to use it and using it for illegitimate reasons. You know, that's why we trademark names. We trademark names so that we hold on to its identity, its definition, and its character. Well, God's names are trademarked, but we have a world today that's forging it. They will use his name without it relating to his person. But when you come to understand and appreciate the names of God, you will come to understand that his name is powerful. His name is tremendous because his name and names are transforming. The first name we want to look at in looking at the names of God is his introductory name. This is the name where we first read about him in the Bible, in the first verse of the Bible. Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. It says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The Hebrew word for God in Genesis 1:1 is the word Elohim. Elohim. That's a rich word because even in that one verse, we're given an education on the names of God. First of all, we learn that Elohim is transcendent. Transcendent means to be distinct. He is distinct from his creation. You know, there are a lot of views about God that amalgamate him with the creation. But he's distinct from the creation because he existed before the creation. It says, in the beginning, Elohim created the heavens and earth. Well, if he created the heavens and earth, then he existed outside of the heavens and earth in order to be the creator of the heavens and earth. That he is responsible for time because it says in the beginning. So if he created and his creation brought about the beginning, then he sits outside of the beginning, and since the beginning equals time, he sits out of time, which means he exists in eternity. So we learn from this first verse that our great God exists outside of time, but he also exists outside of space and matter. We know that because he created space and matter, because he created the heavens and the earth. So he exists outside of time, he exists outside of space, and he exists outside of matter. In the beginning, God. But we find out something else in this chapter about God, Elohim, and that is he has personhood. He's a person. We know he's a person because he's talking. Let there be light. Let's separate the land from the water. He's talking. He's creating things. He's thinking in order to speak cognitively. Thought precedes words, so he's thinking. He's also acting. And let me tell you something else he's doing throughout this first chapter of creation. He's feeling, because he said, that's good. That's good. In fact, he gets so excited, he closes it down with, that's real good. It's very good. So this creator Elohim, this creator God, exists outside of time and space, but yet he interacts with time and space. In fact, we're told in Jeremiah 23, verse 24, that he fills the heavens and the earth. So he not only made it, he occupies it. In the same way that air occupies this room and air occupies our planet, we discover that God occupies the heavens and earth. So there's nowhere to run and nowhere to hide because he sits outside of it while being a full occupant within it. Now, I know that's a lot to grab, and you can't think about it too long or you go jumping out somebody's window. But that's how awesome God is. We find out about this God that his creation, theologians call it ex nihilo, or as Hebrews 11 verse 3 says, that he created the things that are seen out of things that are not visible. In other words, he created something out of nothing. That's ex nihilo. Now, you can't do that. Science can't do that. I love Job chapter 12, verses 7 to 9, because God says, why don't you let man investigate the animals and investigate nature and discover the handiwork of God? So God even invites science to check him out. If you don't believe I can do what I do the way I do it, check me out, and you will see how awesome I am. You know, evolution believes that nobody with nothing created everything. You can't buy that line, it'll make a monkey out of you. No, our great God has created time and space and matter, the galaxies, Andromeda, which is 2.5 million light years away. It would take 4,400,000 years in Earth years to send a message to it and receive a message back from it in light year speed. And yet God created it by speaking it into existence. That's how great Elohim is. The word Elohim is plural, by the way. We call it a majestic plural. It comes from El. El means strong one. And it's a majestic plural because God exists in plurality. We don't have the details in Genesis 1, but we get the hint. And that is, God exists in plurality. Even when he makes man, he said, let us make man. And then he says, and he made man in his own image. So he speaks in plurality and yet operates in singularity. How can you exist in plurality, operate in singularity, all at the same time? Well, it's sort of like a pretzel. You got a pretzel with 3 holes. First hole is not the second hole is not the third hole. All 3 holes are distinct, but they're all tied together by the same dough. The Father's not the Son is not the Spirit, but they all have the dough of divine nature. They all have the dough of deity at work in their lives. And so you and I get to discover this great God. We discover this great God in his creative genius when he is crafting creation in such a way that he even restores things that are messed up. It says in verse 2, the earth was without form and void, darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the spirit of Elohim was moving over the surface of the water. Then God said, let there be light. And of course, there was light. Here we have God bringing order out of a chaos situation. Without form and void is a Hebrew word, tohu wabohu. Tohu wabohu basically means a garbage dump, a swamp. That's why he has to separate the land from the water, because it's all mixed together. But God has to bring order out of chaos. See, that's why you need to know the word Elohim, because life can get chaotic. Life can get messed up. Life can get confusing. But when you know the name Elohim, he can take nothing and make something. He can take madness and mess and create a miracle. Now, if he can do it in a universe, then can he do it in the universe of our lives? Because his name is Elohim, and he is good. Because every time he does something, he recognizes how good it was. He says, it's good, it's good, it's good. And then ultimately, he creates man. And when he creates man, man in his own image, it is the hallmark of his creation. You and I are the hallmark of his creation because you and I have been created in the image of God. Yes. That means we've been designed to mirror him. We can't mirror him as though we were him, but we can mirror him as reflections of him. So we were created to mirror the great God in a way that the rest of nature has not been given that opportunity nor that privilege. His name is Elohim. In the first chapter through the second chapter, verse 4, that's the only name used of God. Every time you see God, you see the word Elohim, 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 some 35 times in the span of that just a chapter and a few verses. And what is he doing in this introductory name that he gives himself? Well, what he's doing is letting you see his creative genius. You know how creative God was when he instituted creation? He made it so he wouldn't have to do it twice, because he created in such a way that creation could replicate itself. And so animals replicate themselves. The way the flowers bloom and the trees grow and pollen and bees repollinate, all of that is reproducing itself naturally. So we can live for thousands of years and not run out of air, not run out of water, not run out of grass. We can do that, not run out of food, because God has built in what he's going to do for us tomorrow by what he creates today. And he created reproductive systems. See, you've never met anybody like this before. And he's one of a kind. That's why they said, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord God is one." Elohim is unique in his being, unique in his person. Now, what people want to do is they want to use Elohim without acknowledging Elohim. It was like Nebuchadnezzar, who said, "I did this by my own strength and by my own power," when all you're doing is piggybacking off of someone else. And then you've got the nerve, many people do, to be an atheist. You got the nerve. In fact, as a man told an atheist one time, he says, "You atheists have a holiday." He says, "What do you mean we have a holiday? We don't have they don't have any holiday." "Oh yeah, there is an atheist holiday." He said, "Well, what is it?" He said, "April Fool's Day." That's your holiday, because the scripture says the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. Nature reveals him. Nature expresses him. Every time you see the sun go up or the moon come up, you are seeing the handiwork of our great God. And that ought to elicit a response. Oh Lord, how majestic are you? How awesome are you? And because you're this great Elohim, I don't want to be independent of you. I don't want to be separated from you. Now, I know it looks like in our world, people can do well without God. I understand it looks like that. That they can deny him, curse him, reject him, and abandon him, and still be looking like life is fine. In fact, you find people in Scripture getting jealous of the God haters. Because the God haters sometimes, the Elohim haters, sometimes look like they're doing better than the God lovers. And it's looking like things are going well. But it's like a true event that happened a few years ago. A few years ago, on a little small runway, there was a single engine plane that took off by itself. It just took off by itself. I guess the pilot left it in gear unintentionally, and it just ran down the runway, and it just took off by itself. And it climbed and climbed and climbed, and it got pretty high with nobody in control. It was running its own existence, and it was running it independently. But about 90 miles out, the plane ran out of gas and came crashing down to the ground. Now, you can go a long way, you think, without Elohim. You can climb the career success ladder. You can climb the recognition ladder. You can climb the prosperity ladder. You can climb the power ladder, and you can think you're doing it on your own. But about 90 miles down the road, when life crashes in on you and you start to run out of gas, when there's a sickness that the doctors can't fix, a problem that the counselors can't solve, a predicament that you can't resolve, and you come crashing to the ground, you'll discover that God's law of gravity still works. And that when it's all said and done, his law will rule. And his word will stay true. In the beginning, Elohim created the heaven and earth because name matters. It is the name he wants to introduce you to get your life started in understanding the power of his name. El, strong one. Elohim, the plural God, who creates, who reproduces. And then I love how he closes this, because after he's done all of his creative work, after he's done all of this marvel that has been uncontaminated by sin, when he's done what he planned to do, we read in chapter 2, God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all of his work which God had created and made. Now, please note, he didn't rest because he was tired, because he ain't worked that hard. I mean, all he did was talk. And so, I mean, how tired can you be? Just talking, you know? Let there be, let there be, let there be. And everything he said came into existence in harmony. No, he didn't rest because he was tired. He rested because he was finished. Basically, on the seventh day, he was saying, I rest my case. You've seen what I can do, and I'm going to enjoy what I have done. All through the Bible, God's people are called to rest. The whole book of Hebrews is about rest. We're told in chapter 4, we're told in chapter 6, there is a rest that belongs to the people of God. It doesn't mean that you're tired. It means that you're finished. In other words, God, you take it from here. Amen. You've done everything. I've responded to what you've done. You take it from here. Says you resting, I'm a rest. He told Israel, for 6 days you gather, but on that seventh day, you rest. You let me take it from here. Elohim means that you can rest and relax in the power of God. That doesn't mean you're irresponsible. Doesn't mean you don't do what God expects you to do. But it does mean that you understand that the powerful God, Elohim, is big enough for whatever is taking place in your life. So the next time you've got to wrestle with power, I want you to remember a name. It's a special name because it's the first name. In fact, you can relate to him on a first name basis. Because it says, in the beginning, Elohim created the heavens and the earth. And so I guess as we close this session, I want to say what the author of the Psalm said in Psalm 34, verse 3. Oh, magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. Oh, magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. You know, in football season, when a player, particularly a player on defense, gets through the line and is able to grab or sack the quarterback or tackle the running back before he's crossed the line of scrimmage, where he's made a big play and everybody's excited, you'll see him raise his hands and start doing this. He'll start pumping it up. What he's saying to the crowd as he pumps it up is give it up. What he's saying is join me in the celebration of this big thing I've just done. I just sacked the quarterback. I've just trapped the halfback behind the line of scrimmage. I just broke up the play. And I feel so good right now about what I just did. And since I feel this good, I don't want to feel good by myself. So as I pump it up, well, why don't you join me and magnify my joy in what I just did by you celebrating with me. So, oh, magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. Somebody ought to raise your hand and pump it up, pump it up, pump it up, pump it up. Because his name is Elohim.